of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Welcome. We have some distinguished guests with us this evening who I'll introduce in just a minute. Do we have any public comment from the board?
I do. Three things, if I may, Mr. Chair. So first, the cable advisory public hearing that was to be held this Thursday has been postponed, and it is tentatively set for June 15th, but that date must be set by the Board of Selectmen at their next meeting. So anybody who had all this pent-up energy to come out on Thursday, save it and come out on the 15th. Second, I want to remind people that the postponed Are You Smarter Than Our Sixth Graders, which got snowed out in its original date, has been rescheduled for Friday, June 2nd. It's still going to be at the middle high school in the auditorium at 7 to 9. So again, please, we have 16 teams competing. I have the very distinct honor of being your host for the 5th consecutive year, and it's always a good time. So please come out and support the Boys and Girls Club. And last, I want to give thanks to the Lunenburg Music Department for their wonderful Pops concert on Friday. Ms. Wardwell and Ms. Mitchell did a fabulous job, and as did all the students. It really was first rate. It was nice being in an auditorium, a really acoustically sound auditorium instead of a gym, and it really was worth the performance. So that program has been astounding me for years, continues to do that, and as long as we keep those instructors and those conductors, it really will be. So thanks to all of them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, so the Architectural Preservation District Commission came out with guidelines and regulations for regulating the reuse in the Village District in the center of town, so I encourage people to look at that information available at the town clerk's office. They're having a hearing tonight to talk about some of that and additional work going further on that. And I also just want to clarify my positions on the articles regarding the reuse of the town buildings. I oppose the articles because I wasn't ready for that to be turned over to the Board of Selectmen, but I still support the reuse committee's concept of selling the properties to appropriate developers for appropriate reuse in the center of town. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any public comment from the public? Mr. McDowell.
Good evening, Town Manager, Board. I'm sorry, I just got out of work and...
Who are you?
1 second, okay. Okay, I'm Dave McDonald, Island Road, Lunenburg, and I just want to say a couple things to take up a moment of your time. First of all, Mr. Alonso, I'm here, one reason to say thank you. Thank you for everything you've done for the town. When I started working, getting involved with the town, it was because of you and Paula for me to get involved, and I haven't regretted a day doing it, so I thank you. And I also know you're a man that not only have done a good job for the town, but volunteering your time between the Boys Club, the Lions Club, the Town Fair, the Salvation Army. When I needed some people to help build the bocce ball court, you were the first one there, because you had all the tools, so that kind of helped.
Bocce ball tools.
Bocce ball tools. So I just personally, Betty and I want to wish you and your wife Christine a happy life, and I know you won't be leaving. I'm sure you're still going to be involved, and especially with the Boys and Girls Club. So thank you for what you've done. I'm sure there are going to be other people come up here doing the same thing, but it's not a moralization of you, but you've done a great job, and this board has also done a good job. The other reason why I'm here is I want to talk a little bit about the building reuse, and Mr. Ebersol, I appreciate your comments on that. At town meeting, it was kind of funny. One, there was 1% of the people that were there, and I appreciate all the people who showed up at the town meeting, that we had 75 or 80 people, if I'm not mistaken, where I know we've been involved with bigger numbers. It'd be nice to see more people come out, especially on an important situation like this. But there was two, and again, I want to thank all the people who came out and voted, and I truly support what the town people said. I'm glad it's in your hands. But there was two comments made that night, and one of them was a gentleman got up and talked about revitalization of how you're going to revitalize the town, and that was a good question. And I just want to give you, and I've been on by the way, the Building Reuse Committee for 4 years with everybody, and it was a great committee to work with. But revitalization, the definition, is to create an atmosphere of opportunity and success. And when we started the Building Reuse Committee 4 years ago, there was no opportunity in the center of town, because, as most towns in Massachusetts, they just started doing the Village District. Now, after 4 years or 2.5 years of work, the Village District did, the planning boards from past to present did a good job as far as coming down with a new bylaw for the Village District. And we're very proud of what the planning boards from the past to the present have done. But to create opportunity, it's kind of a win-lose situation. And if you look at the town of Lunenburg, in the center especially, you have two landlords in the center of town. One is the town of Lunenburg, and the other one is the gentleman who owns everything else, except this town hall. That's a monopoly. And when you have a monopoly, that kind of shuts down a chance for opportunity. So between the planning boards and the board of the reuse committee, we created an opportunity and an atmosphere to do so for a success. Another person that I was surprised, and we didn't really answer it, a resident got up and said she would like green space. And I agree with that too. I think the town should have some green space. But green space comes with a price. And just to give you some numbers, and we didn't talk about this at town meeting, but if you want to tear down the patio, it's going to cost this town $1 million point X amount of money. And that was based on 2 years ago, I think, Mr. Toll. So the numbers may have gone up. If you want to tear down the primary school, they're looking at about $200,000 to $250,000 because that building has black mold in it, so it has to be eradicated before that's torn down. And if you tear down the Brooks house, as far as we know from the reports, you're talking about $45,000. That's going to bring the town out of pocket $1.25 million. And I don't know where the town can get that. And that would be an override situation, but it's also an unnecessary situation. The other thing, if you take a look and if you tear down those two buildings and make green space, that leaves this building and the Ritter building. And again, if you look at the reports we have, the remodel for the Ritter is anywhere between $3 and $5 million, and that's not a full renovation. That's to accommodate what we need to do. To re-renovate this town hall, and I have the engineer reports, and I'm sure you've all seen them, from McKinsey Engineering back on 2013, almost 4 years ago today. They're estimating it to come in at $2.1 million. That's for engineering, for making the building not to fall down, and for minor modifications from sprinkler systems and so on. Now, I know this past town meeting, the town approved from capital budget $90,000 to paint the building, which I fully support. The building has to be taken care of. But if we turn everything over to green space, we're losing a great deal of money. And I think what has to be done is, and I look to you, the wisdom of this board, is to look at all the data that we have. But you're talking at least $8 million over a period of time that we don't have. And I don't know how you're going to get $8 million. Last year, as every year, and Mr. Alonso, you and I talked about this, the town approved the highest budget ever. And every year is going to be the highest budget ever. Well, I've been a person in this town that people who know me has tried to control the budgets, and with the DPW and so on. And to go in and ask the citizens to pay for an override to tear down a building and make green space doesn't make any sense to me. But it also takes away the work that everyone has been doing over the last 4 years, which is to create the atmosphere of opportunity and success. So I urge residents at home to call you. That's their judicious responsibility. It's called the Selectmen. Let them tell you. This is an important decision that the town's going to be making over the next few years. I urge the citizens to call town manager. I also urge the citizens to pull the reports that we have from TAPE. We did a lot of time. The information's there. All I ask is for the citizens to look at it. So In saying that, I'm not here for a debate, I just wanted to make those 2 points. And I also want to say, Election Day is Saturday, and I really like to see a good turnout from all the citizens. It's our right to vote, it's our right to go to town meeting, and that's one reason why I came to Lunenburg, is that's what's good about the town of Lunenburg. It's a nice town, and you have a say. So if you sit there and approve a $34 million budget and come to us, or come to you a few weeks or a few years from now and complain about it, shame on you for not coming to town meeting, because your voice can be heard. And politics is funny. And if you look at the national politics, what's going on, forget about it. We have our own town. We're proud to live here. I'm very proud to live here. And the last thing I'd like to say is, I know it's being turned over to the selectmen. And one of the things I was concerned about, and Mr. Toll, you know, is I don't want what we've done over the last 4 years to die with you. We have to keep going. We have to do the right thing for the town. And I volunteer my time and effort to work with the new board. Anything I can do, I'll be glad to help you. But I think we have a great opportunity for success in this town. Thank you. And Mr. Alonso, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just got to grab my hat. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Yes?
Hi, Damon McQuaid, 49 Brookview Terrace. I just want to take a moment to formally thank Mr. Alonso for all his years of service and share a quick memory from the very first time that I stood at this podium about 6 years ago. Select Board looked very different at the time. I was interviewing for an empty slot on the Historic Commission. At the time, they had 2 empty seats, and I think everybody was just happy to have someone with a pulse willing to show up and go to the meetings. So I didn't get a lot of questions that night, but the one that stuck out in my head was from Mr. Alonso, and he asked me why I wanted to volunteer and get involved with the town. And it seems like a simple question, and I know I should have seen that one coming, but it took me a second to think and register and answer, and I still remember my answer, and it was, in order to inform the decisions we make for the future, it's important to understand and respect our past. And it's a simple thing, it was a simple question, I'm sure he didn't think much of it at the time, but I'm glad he made me put it into words, not just for the board, but for myself, because I know over the past 6 years of volunteering with the town, I've definitely asked myself that question, why do I continue doing these things for the town? And it's, every time I ask myself that memory is the first thing that comes to my mind. And I'm very glad that you have your own, wake up every morning and find your own reason to come and volunteer for the town and be involved. And that goes for all the members of the various boards and committees in town, but especially for you, Mr. Alonso, thank you.
Any other public comment? Yes?
Turn it into a Tom Alonso roast.
Maybe.
Hi, I wasn't coming here to public comment tonight, but I think there's a little behind-the-scenes debate going on here. Katie Adams from Williams Drive. I spoke out about green space at town meeting. I've done extensive community outreach, both before town meeting and after, and I think some things are priceless. I don't think you can put a price on a field where people can have fairs and farmers markets. Hearing it all discussed as money, I'd like to suggest if you sell the land to a developer, who really profits off of it? The developer. And we have complaints maybe about certain landlords in town. Well, we're handing over town land to another landlord who we don't necessarily know we're going to be able to control. So to talk about it as if it's a vision of perfection, no, it's a vision of whoever owns the land. And it may not match what we want that vision to be. And so I think, let somebody have a vision on non-municipal land and preserve municipal land for priceless things, like coming together as a community. And just having it all talked about in terms of money, the debt expires on things like the public safety building and the new town library in 2023. That's very close from now. That's a time when taxes go down. So I don't think we have to look at everything right now as some big emergency. I think it's an emergency because it's a developer who wants to buy it and develop it. And I've done extensive research. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty because it's not really appropriate, but the person who's going to profit off that land is a developer, and then they're going to be the new landlord. And I don't think it's fair to belittle people who want to have, places for the town to be a community, and I don't know how you put a price on that. And to go even further, if we're going to talk about the millions we may need to spend, well, when Turkey Hill may need to be rebuilt somewhere someday, we might have to spend millions to buy property to build it on, because we're out of land. So there's a lot of things to think about moving forward, and, I think It's funny, we're talking about the election, coming out to it because the two people are running unopposed, but, maybe that's not the case, and I hope people really pay attention to what's going on here, and thank you. Unintended public comment / debate.
Any other public comment? Okay. Our first order of business is to welcome our state delegation, Senator Jennifer Flanagan and Representatives Jennifer Benson and Stephen Hay. We have a lot of business to do with them tonight. They're going to tell us what's going on in the State House and have a dialogue with us about some of our needs and requests. But I'm going to ask them to indulge me while I recognize Mr. Alonso at his last Selectmen meeting. As I said at town meeting, Tom has lived on Lancaster Ave in Lunenburg with his wife Christine Foltz since 1998. Tom has been on the Finance Committee in 2003 through 2005. He's been a member of the Board of Selectmen since 2005 till this evening. He served as chairman of this board 4 times. He was on the Town Charter Review Committee in 2006 and 2007. He was on the Municipal Web Service Task Force in 2011. He was and is on the Cable Advisory Committee. He's a town hall clockwinder and has been since 2003. He also serves on the Lunenburg Boys and Girls Club Board, and he's done that since 2010, and is the game show host for Are You Smarter Than Our 6th Graders, and he's done that for the last 5 years. Tom serves on the School Building Committee from 2015 to present, and Tom was a founding member of the Lunenburg Civic Forum in 2002 through 2005. I'd like to welcome our state delegation, but also congratulate Tom and thank him for his service to the town.
Well, on behalf of the delegation, we have a citation for you. I was hoping this would turn into a roast.
You can start right now.
Considering that you started on the FinCom the year I started on the school committee, and so we have become very good friends after all of the service to the town, and I'll tell you that it takes a very dedicated person, as all of you know, to volunteer your time on so many town boards, and to take stands sometimes publicly among your neighbors and friends that aren't necessarily good, happy ones, or, popular, thank you. And local politics is really hard. And so anybody who's willing to do it and do it as long as you have, you really have to just say, thank you. I don't know what's wrong with you, but thank you. And so, do you want to read? Who wants to read? Go ahead. Okay. From the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and a joint citation from the House of Representatives and the Senate, be it hereby known to all that the House of Representatives and the Senate offers its sincerest congratulations to Thomas A. Alonso. I happen to know he doesn't like that. In recognition of his years of service to the town of Lunenburg, the entire membership extends its very best wishes and expresses the hope for future good fortune and continued success in all endeavors. Given this 16th day of May 2017, signed by all of us. And so thank you so much for your service to the town. You want a photo?
If I can ask you have something else for us, or are you ready to start?
Ready when you are.
Okay.
Whenever you are, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. We just want 2 more minutes. One is the town manager has a presentation.
Yes. So just a small token of appreciation from the board and on behalf of the town for all your years of service. My short time here is nothing compared to your long time of service to this town. And so we thank you for that. You're an example of what public service is all about.
Give this to my caretaker.
You can't pass those off as anniversary gifts.
No, see, it is turning into a roast.
And then finally, I did promise Tom the last word, I guess. So, and those of you that know Tom, he's going to take the last word whether we give it to him or not.
And please note that he's a member of the Board of Selectmen until after the election on Saturday, until the new person is sworn in.
True. She's cutting it short. They cut it short already because I didn't even get the agenda emailed to me for this meeting, so that's how they were warming me into it. I want to thank everybody first for the words they said already. It goes to show that, you know, the value of $20 bill really does maintain itself, so thank you. You get a chance to reflect over 12 years, and the first thing it was like, how did it's not a question I get very often, but I reflected on how I got involved. So in about 2002, there was a plan by the then CAFO, wasn't even called town manager then, called the Capital Facilities Plan, which was a huge project to address, very apropos to tonight, our aging buildings. So there was an old primary school, there was the Ritter Library was still used as a library, although it was sorely out of space. There was, it was used as the library, 7 or 10 parking spaces. The public safety building was still in the center of town and certainly in need of replacement too. So a group of people got together and the CAFO put together a plan, and they were trying to promote the plan as citizen activists do. And my wife, being a very active member of the library, that was one of the focal points where they were recruiting people to be on that ad hoc action committee. And they were meeting all around at some of the members' houses. And one evening, I knew she was involved in these, and she said, well, I think it's time that she hosted one. Now, I wasn't involved in the group at all. And I said, yeah, that's fine. And I said, you know what, I'll just sit in. I'll sit in and I'll hear what people have to say. And I said, as a citizen, the first thing I told the people, and many I knew, many I didn't, I said, I'll be your test case. I mean, I'm a taxpayer in town, and I'd like to know why I should vote for this. And so they went through their pitch, they had their meeting, and it really drew me in. And from that point, I started going to selectmen meetings to find out. You couldn't get any information back then. There was very little there was very little public access TV, there was no town website, it was very difficult to get information. And so I got drawn into coming to the selectmen's meetings for 2 years. So that was my entrance into it. Something as simple as a public activist committee trying to promote the well-being of the town. And now here we are 12 years later, so I was thinking to myself, how do you quantify 12 years? And I was sitting at the pop concert in the middle high school. I realized that 12 years is exactly the same length as you do as you go to school if you exclude kindergarten. So I don't think of myself as retiring, I think of myself as graduating. This is my graduation. And truly the whole experience has been a lot like school. So every year you build on knowledge from the last year. There's not a year that's gone by here that you don't keep learning things. And sure that they may be minute details or nuances, but you keep learning, and if you didn't have the years before you wouldn't have that wealth to bring on. New people bring on new ideas, but you need to have the background, so that's why it takes about a year to really get your footing on the board. Some years, like some classes, are harder than others, some are easier, and some subjects require a lot of homework. So that's part that really is like it. Like schools, there are cliques. It's hard to get into certain groups, especially at the beginning, when there's old friendships and old alliances. You meet incredible amounts of friends of all different backgrounds that you never would have imagined. You're also your share of adversaries, which is good. And you really, every once in a while, you meet that bully. So you couldn't be school without that. And certainly we've had that here in town. But all in all, they've been great mentors and great teachers in my experience here. And I won't ignore, there are many, and I don't want to affront anybody by not mentioning people, but there's many who helped me when I was back on the Finance Committee, when I got on the Board of Selectmen, and all the other committees I served on. The best thing is the report card. I think in looking back, there's certainly been successes, and there's been disappointments, but if I had a grade, and I think most people, I think that the report card has been pretty positive. I think the successes have far outnumbered the disappointments in reference to that capital facilities plan, which failed. Since then, every project on there, the public safety building, the new primary school, the public library, the DPW garage, the middle and high school, they all got accomplished and built in their time. The pavement management plan, which took a lot of work, our DPW director is here, he mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, that took a lot of effort over many years of his and many years in town being batted around. We got that done. We have a strong financial performance that I think is headlined by the fact that during my tenure, not because of me, because I'm just one person, but the tenor of the town changed so that our financial rating and bond rating improved 4 separate times in 12 years to the second highest available to a municipality. So that is incredible. In those years, I really maintained the idea of communication. So communication has always been a forefront of one of the things I wanted to do. One of my wife's bosses once said that her job was to help him make good decisions. And I think that the selectman's job is probably the utmost importance is to help townspeople make good decisions. And that, you do that by keeping people informed and you keep them engaged. And the transparency that has happened in those 12 years has been incredible. We've increased cable channel access of public meetings almost across the board, that almost every major committee, commission, and board has televised at least one, if not more, televised meetings. They're all published by our PAC TV on YouTube, so if you don't have cable TV, if you have satellite or something else, you can watch it on the internet. There's a new website that we try to keep people up to date, so that's been important, and transparency's been important. I think that the time when I started here, executive sessions were almost commonplace. Almost every week had an executive session. And I think we have few, and the ones we have are generally contract negotiations and the lawsuit here and there, which also has decreased incredibly in our time. So the other thing that changed is that there's a different respect for all the participants in the process. And everyone is encouraged at almost every level to participate. As tonight we heard public comment on things that happened at town meeting. Those are all excellent exchange of ideas. I think people need to get out and not get worried to come to this podium. In the beginning, when I started, it was really a little bit unnerving to come to the podium. And it shouldn't be now. I mean, if it is because people have TV fright, okay, I understand. But I'm talking about the response you'll get from the select board. The thing that's amazing to me is so many people come up to you and they say that, well, I'm glad you did it. It's a real thankless job. And I always politely, I don't want to say contradict that, but I don't believe that. It's not a thankless job. It's just that the thanks don't come in the way that you would think they would. I mean, not everybody comes up to you and congratulates you, although there is that. But when I remember walking after last year's high school graduation was in the gym of the new building. It was the first public event. And walking behind people and saying how much they loved the building and the way the kids, after their first week at school, and I got to meet them, what their response was, what the administration's response was, and every other building that was built, from our public safety officials to our librarians, every one of those people and the people who use those buildings were so appreciative because of the respect the town gave them in getting a new facility for them. So it comes in all different ways. It comes from the faces of people during the homecoming parade or the Christmas event at town hall. It comes from the town band concerts. All of these things are the ways that people show their appreciation for what you've done, and you just have to listen for them. And as such, I also have my own thanks. I want to thank, first of all my current members of the board. They've been an excellent board to serve with for several years. Phyllis is the newest member of the board, and that's been 3 years ago. So it's been a pleasure, and I thank them for their service. and all my colleagues on the FinCom, past and present, the board, past and present, all the department heads and town employees and all the members of the town in general, and every elected and appointed committee, board and commission. All of them, it's been a pleasure to work with them. I've worked with at least all of them at one point or another on different projects, and everybody has brought their perspective, shared their opinions, and they've made the work enjoyable. I don't know if I'd call it fun sometimes, but certainly enjoyable. And they've always kept their focus on what's best for the town, and that's what makes it enjoyable. So you can be lighthearted and you can still focus on the hard work at the same time. I know that our state representative colleagues know exactly what that is. And of course, I want to thank all the citizens of Lunenburg. My first meeting of the citizens of Lunenburg on my first failed election campaign was in 2004, and I drove my bike around town. I figured it was spring cleanup time, the weather was getting nice, so that would be the best way to introduce myself, because I wasn't on any other committee at that point. Actually, I just started on the finance committee. And I rode around, and anybody who was in their yard cleaning up leaves or doing anything, I stopped them and introduced myself. And it was a very interesting time, because when you have somebody in a bicycle come up to you with campaign lawn signs on front and back wheel, it's certainly not something you really want to run to the fence with and talk to. So I appreciate all the people who talked to me during those times. And you learned a lot about all the different factions, about different towns, different neighborhoods at completely different fields. And that was my introduction. And from the time I finally won in 2005 till now, for all their support and all their participation and all their criticism and all their competition and all their ideas and all their praise and all their complaints, all of those things were important to help me as a selectman understand perspectives and ideas that I would not have thought of myself, and that represented their point of the world and their neighborhood and their ideas and their family. So I thank everybody from that. I've been really, really lucky. I've been lucky my whole life, and there's not a day that goes by I don't think about that. But this has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, and I have so many of you to thank for that. But there is one person that I want to say that I'm most thankful for, without whom none of this would be possible, and that is my wonderful wife, Christine. So without her unwavering encouragement and her undying support and her endless patience in the face of campaign seasons and countless weeknights meetings and town events, and all the while serving on committees and commissions of her own, without her I couldn't have devoted the hours that I have to this town, and I cannot thank her enough for all she's done. Last night was our anniversary, and in quantifying what 12 years means, I realized that I've been on the board one half of my married life, so that brought another perspective. So I do thank you for all you've done for me. I love you. There'll be certainly things I'll miss. The one thing that she said that I should point out, I'll certainly miss the great pay. So that is true. But there's a lot of things I miss. I won't go into them. I mean, Representative Hay said to me before the meeting that it won't hit you till next Tuesday when you get ready for the meeting and then you realize you don't have a meeting. So we'll see. That's probably true. My one parting thought is I urge people to participate, and I've always said this, and consider serving in any capacity you can. Yes, it will take time. Yes, it will take work. And I can assure you that you will be paid back in so many positive ways that are hard to explain and that you can only experience. You can't tell somebody about. The one creed that always helped me in any situation is remembering that we are all in this together, and that the more we work together, the less the load will be on any one person, and the faster we will get where we're headed. And I promise I'll always be there, to answer Mr. McDonald, who's not here, but who said, we know you'll be there. Yes, I always will be there to continue the school metaphor as a proud alumnus, to work there with you, albeit in a different capacity. So once again, I thank everyone for showing up, and I thank everyone for their continued support.
Thank you,
Mr.
Tom.
Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Representative Benson and delegation.
and Representative Senator Flanagan. And I will say, in light of tonight, congratulations to the rest of the board, because I think your meetings will now be significantly shorter.
I stepped right into that.
Well, it's quite a special night to be here, and we're now going to bring the tone way down and talk about what's going on at the state level. As you know, Representative Hay and I already worked on the House budget. You have the numbers from that, and maybe Senator Flanagan can give some highlights of what you're looking forward to do next week.
Well, you want to bring the tone down?
I said down.
As many of you know, the numbers are not what we are expecting. We are looking at lower numbers than what the House had. The budget came out today from the Senate. So beginning this afternoon, our staff began to analyze exactly what that means for cities and towns, get our amendments ready. Our budget has been designated a tax document, which means that we're probably going to have a tax debate on Tuesday when we start the budget debate. With that comes no promises, because again, as we have the two chambers, it needs to go through the conference committee. So I think what we're going to see is a lot of questioning on how reliable our numbers are, what we're going to have to do. Do we have to bring down the consensus revenue from the Senate's perspective, which is interesting because it's usually the reverse. It's usually that the representatives come in with a number and the Senate comes in and saves the day and has a bigger number. This year it's the reverse. We don't have the benefit of better numbers than the House does. And so it's going to be very, very tricky to try to really attempt to address many of the needs that communities has, besides Chapter 70, besides local aid, besides all the UGA, all of that. That's really, we do as much as we possibly can because we want to make sure cities and towns get what they need. But when we start to talk about specific line items and specific programs that everyone loves, you know, we talk about green space, we talk economic development, transportation, opioid addiction, mental health, healthcare, you name it. The other problem that we have, and that we're being very mindful of, which I know does not go unnoticed at this board, is we have a very unstable Washington DC to deal with. And, you know, over 40% of my budget is healthcare. And so if we get that red pen from Washington and we don't get the money that we need, you are going to see severe cuts come from our state budget that we are not going to be able to sustain. We have a governor who's trying to do as much as he possibly can to make sure that there's money there. I haven't heard talk of taking money out of our stabilization account, even though we have quite a bit that we've saved up over the years. But the reality is that we're waiting like everybody else is. That next tweet that the president puts out has us all on pins and needles. So as we move into the debate next week in the Senate, I urge people from the town to contact us. I urge them to be very, very realistic in what we're asking for and what we're expecting to come out of that, because I do not envy the Ways and Means Committee. Once they get these two documents and they have to rectify them, there are going to be some serious decisions that they have to make. Having said that, we do know that, you know, our delegation, you're very fortunate to have an amazing delegation up here in North Central Massachusetts, not just the three of us, but there's another...
Although we are amazing.
Although we are amazing. There's another 5 members of the delegation that comprise my Senate district, that regardless of party, it's more about geography. It's more about where we come from, how we live, what our priorities are for North Central Massachusetts. And I think that we really have the benefit of a team type approach, rather than being that adversarial and being at each other's throats all the time. So it's nothing like you see in Washington. It's nothing like, you know, sometimes the papers can portray, and we're working as diligently as we can and as hard as we can. We have amazing staff. I know Sean's here from Representative Benson's office that work side by side with us that are in our communities as well. So with that, if you need a therapist, I know where to send you. Chair of the Mental Health Committee, so I can call in some favors.
I thought you were going to ask them to recommend a therapist for us.
I can get us that too. But you know, things like public safety, we know public safety is important. We know the drug issues are on the forefront of everyone's minds. Education, you know, as the chief can probably tell you, this current fentanyl and this fentanyl is going to be so dangerous to our communities that we're going to have to invest and we're going to have to do some things. I was with the Secretary Secretary of Public Safety a couple nights ago, and we were talking about it, and it's just so dangerous for our emergency personnel. So you're gonna start to see us shift a little bit towards that area. Representative?
Well, with that, I will say the senator's absolutely right. We work very well across the aisle here in Massachusetts. Look at the last years of budgets that have gone by through the State House, and they've been either unanimous or nearly unanimous, certainly bipartisan, because we all really believe in trying to do the best that we can for Massachusetts. So, and that means every city and town. So as you look at the numbers, as you look at the budget, sometimes I hear, oh, they don't care. I mean, this is always our number one priority, and that is true from when the governor first creates his budget in January to, the House and the Senate and conference committees. So this is always our number one goal, is to get that money out to the cities and towns. So I will say, again, just to give you an update, I am the chair of Consumer Protection and Professional Licensure, which covers, it's basically the old government regulations committee. So we do everything from all kinds of licensing issues to all the alcohol laws, lottery, horse racing.
iLottery.
Yes, iLottery, maybe someday, and she's pushing that, and a lot of consumer protection issues. So you can imagine the gamut that runs. So we have a lot of bills in committee. We had our second hearing today, so we're very much on the go, and working hard already, having lots of meetings on the bills before us. I will say just one quick thing. I think this is very important. In a couple sessions ago, I was the acting chair of healthcare finance and learned a lot about that, which wasn't an area that I knew a lot about before I got into the legislature. And with everything that's happening in Washington around the ACA repeal and possible replacement with something else, a lot of people have asked me, can we just go back to what we had prior to the ACA, prior to Obamacare here in Massachusetts, the healthcare reform that started in 2006. And actually, that is not going to be possible if what the Republicans pass through the House stands, because they're changing Medicaid, and we partnered with the federal government to fund that healthcare reform. And without that funding, we're looking at possibly $1 billion leaving the state budget that supports healthcare. So this not only impacts our ability to cover people here in Massachusetts, it impacts schools and special education students. So this is really important, and this fight isn't something that's just happening in DC. It's really going to impact us. So I really urge people to pay attention to what's happening. And there's a lot of other areas, like environmental areas, transportation funding that could very much impact the TIP program that we all depend on. So these debates around the federal budget will really impact all of us here at home.
I think it's estimated $11 billion we would lose out of our budget if Washington got what they wanted.
And then with changes to NIH funding and other areas, looking at all the teaching hospitals and universities that are doing research here in Massachusetts, you're looking at far more, possibly 15,000 jobs or more estimated that we could lose here in Massachusetts relating to cuts in that federal spending. So these have real impacts to Massachusetts, and so it's not something that we can just decide to not pay attention to or gloss over. And I'm not saying that because it's not a political issue, it's just reality. This is what is being discussed, and so we have to have eyes wide open how that will impact us and the decisions that we make, potentially in budgets moving forward. Oh, and we realize you had specific questions, so we can get into those.
Right, so I guess I'll address one of the specific questions. They did ask what committee assignments we have, so I am on the Joint Committee of Higher Education, Joint Committee on Municipalities and Regional Government, Joint Committee on Economic Development and Emerging Technologies, and the Joint Committee on Marijuana Policy. So the representative asked me to speak because it was a question on here about the Marijuana Policy Committee and what we're doing. The Joint Committee on Marijuana Policy has held 5 public hearings across the state. We have traveled to cities and towns, heard over 30 hours of testimony from constituents regarding their ideas, their opinions on what we should do with recreational marijuana. There are a variety of issues that we'll be addressing. A few of them, just so that you understand what we're working on, are things about the marketing and packaging of edibles, the makeup of the commission. Right now, through the law that was passed last November, it is the treasurer and a 2-person committee. There are folks who want it to be a larger committee, more like the Gambling Commission, and we're trying to figure out where that goes. There's a priority for medical companies who are already growing and selling marijuana to have a foot up in the permitting process. That raises a question of equity. I understand why they want to do it, because those people are already doing it and it can roll out faster, but I have a concern about, is that an equal and fair playing field for everybody? I also have a question about it because if you're doing the medical marijuana and you start with the recreational, your profit margin is bigger on your recreational, are you going to close your medical? So we want to make sure that that doesn't occur, because they are 2 different entities that we need to make sure stay that way. There's discussions about the farmers and agricultural people in the state of Massachusetts having accessibility to grow and sell and make profit on this. There is the driving while impaired question, the tax rate, the amount of homegrown that people can have. The opt-out process for cities and towns is very cumbersome, and we're looking at that and have lots of questions from city managers and selectmen and city councils and mayors. And the expungement of criminal records has also been a big issue that's been brought before us that the committee will be looking at. So those are just a few of the many areas that we'll be working on over the next 4 or 5 weeks. The goal is to have something to the governor by July 1st, so I expect that we will be continuing our fast pace in our hard work. Me personally, I can tell you that I have already arranged a meeting with your town manager, the chief of police, and the fire chief to talk about this issue. And on May 8th at Fitchburg State University, I held a district public hearing just for my constituents. About 35 people came out and gave me good input and things to think about and to bring to the table when I meet with my colleagues on the committee to address those issues. Anybody has any questions on those things, you can contact me and I'd be glad to meet or talk on the phone or email with you about it and advocate for what the residents of the 3rd Worcester District want me to do as their representative on that committee. Thank you.
I think it's also important to note, too, though, is that we're just getting, our committees have just begun to be underway, and we've started to have hearings. We had a delay in the start because we had a big debate in the beginning of the year. So as committees are starting to have their hearings, we're all clamoring for the same hearing rooms. So if you see us saying, okay, we have to wait, to have our hearings, it's really because we're all trying to get them at the same time, and the State House is only so big.
And we go to hearings for 2 different reasons. We go because you're on the committee that's hearing the testimony, but we also go to many hearings because we have our bills or other bills that we've co-sponsored that you need to go to speak about.
Yeah.
So you're there in dual roles.
Right. And I neglected to say the committees that I'm on. I don't know if we have that much time, but I chair the Mental Health, Substance Use, and Recovery Committee. I chair the Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities Committee. I vice chair the Public Health Committee. I vice chair / acting chair as the Public Service Committee. I sit on the Representatives Consumer Protection Committee, and I also sit on the State Administration Committee. So
I only have 1 committee.
I've got 4 and a half. So I think that also demonstrates the fact that you have a lot of people in leadership in the delegation up here. Representative Hogan, also from Bolton, is the chair of Public Health. So we have a lot of input when it comes to the agendas of what's happening in both of our chambers. You talk about the Muni bill, it's in telecom. It hasn't had the hearing yet. We still have to go through the process with that. The ambulance bill that everyone's been concerned about year after year, who are we paying and how much are we paying them? It's a bill, but it's also a budget amendment in the House, so now that's up for conference. We can try to file it in the Senate and see if they agree, but this whole conference committee is a really big piece of what's going on with that. And there's a lot of people that pay attention to it every year. Again, if you have those services in your communities, you want to make sure that you're getting the revenues from there that you need to, especially with the number of calls that fire is getting or ambulances are getting now. We were having a conversation in my hearing the other day that the number of medicals versus the number of mental health calls.
Yeah.
It's an interesting fact, when you talk about your ambulance services and you talk about your EMS, they're not all medical calls anymore. It's not someone who's fallen, it's not someone who has a hard time breathing. You have your overdose calls, you have your mental health calls, you have people who just feel they need a ride to the hospital type call. That's costing a lot of money, and so what we want to make sure is that if there's ways to divert that through uses of urgent care centers or through uses of an urgent care for substance abuse, we really want to try to explore all that so that our hospitals are not overburdened, and especially our emergency rooms.
Great. Is there any comments or questions?
One question. When you're talking about the numbers, aside from the federal uncertainty about federal budget numbers, is there any uncertainty about state numbers as well?
Revenue projections.
Go ahead.
The revenue projections for this year are off by 2%, and that makes a difference, and we have to try to figure out how to balance that for the rest of this year. And next year's revenue projections, I think we're going to hold them to on a tight leash, because this year we came up short.
And I think you'll see if you subscribe to State House News, they put out an article today that we released our budget, but the numbers are shaky. So that makes it more difficult for us to go back in and debate, because we now may have to take back some of what we said we want to be able to provide, because we can't pay for it. And again, you talk about it being uncomfortable sometimes being in these positions. The best form of honesty is to just say it, right? And so, but it's hard to tell someone that we don't have the money to support what they think is important, because we know we're working with taxpayer money, which is everyone's money. And we want to make sure that we provide the basics for our communities, but we also know that there are some of those safety net programs that our communities need just in order to function. And that's really why it becomes difficult and important for people to contact us, especially during the budget debates, because we need to know what the priorities are. When you have all this debt that you're paying out for all your new buildings, you may not have money for other things. Your schools, right? Schools now more than ever need support services, not just teachers and not just books. Some of them need behavioral analysts, some of them need behavioral counselors, more than what a guidance counselor does. That takes all of extra money. And short of having a number of grant programs, which are just pilots, we need to be able to fund that for everyone, not just pick and choose or cherry pick which communities get it.
So I would say our budget process in state government is very, very similar to what happens in the town. And at the end of the year, you may have to move money, FinCom may have to do some line item transfers, you may have more going into free cash, you may have a little less, And so we have a lot of people not in state government who get together and look at what they believe the revenue projections will be. It's a group of economists from universities, and people think that we just sit down and we're like, let's just add money to the budget next year, and that's not how it works. And sometimes those projections are off. Sometimes, as we've seen, as the economy has gotten better, the income tax has rolled back, as we're still rolling back to 5. We're now at 5.1. And so in January, when that clicks down, that takes money out of the revenue stream. So even though the economy is getting better, home sales are going up, there are other indicators that show the economy is getting much better. And we're at 3.5% unemployment, which is, technically considered full employment. We are still losing money out of our revenue stream for a variety of reasons, but one of them being, the ratcheting down of the income tax, as well as some other areas. So our job is to try our best to balance all those interests. And like you heard on town meeting floor, as I sat in the back and listened, what is vitally important to one person may not be at all important to somebody else. And so we have towns and constituents who say, well, take money from there and put it in here because this is more important. Well, except for the people who think that's more important. So we're constantly trying our best to figure out where the greatest need is and to balance as well as we can. And, I think we all feel that the last thing we want to do is 9C cuts or anything like that. That is the absolute last resort. And so, I served on the school committee when we went through that and had to recreate budgets, and I know what that's like. So, our goal is to try to be more conservative, so you'll see the Senate, for the first time in my recollection, actually having lower revenue figures than the House did. It's actually, if it weren't sad, I would be kind of happy about it, because I felt like they always made us look bad. You're going to see that we're trying to tighten those reins to avoid having to come back next year with a shortage. We also don't want to come back with more money than we spent, because that means we shortchange somebody. And so we do our best to try to fit it as close as we can.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much, and certainly, we love to see members of the State House, and you're welcome at any time.
Well, I'm right down the street, so anytime.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, our next agenda item is a 7:30 appointment, the Street Cup Replacement Moratorium. And Town Manager and DPW Director will take us through that.
So the draft before you was drafted by our DPW Director. Let him go into a little overview and answer any questions from the board on the draft.
Thank you, Ms. Lamini. Boy, talk about tough acts to follow. Can we take a deep breath here?
Well, after they brought us way down, not usual that DPW brings us back up, but there you go.
Doom and gloom. It's great to see those folks, huh? It really is. You have, I believe the town manager gave you a draft. I'd like, Phyllis, if you could help to take one and pass it along. It's pretty similar. It's almost identical. There's an element on page 3, the final page, that's deleted. What I did to create this, which is pretty much what I do for most everything, and like with the pavement management plan, you talk to different people in the state, you talk to different people in New England, you sort of roll that all up together, you pull it apart, you customize it as to what you feel is best for Lunenburg, and that's exactly what I've done here. I'm hoping that the select board will take this and vote on it to be policy, since you in fact are the policy makers and at the highest level of government in the town, which really, just take a moment here to mention that as you're all reading it diligently, is that I think it says a lot for this board that you look to the person who's the department head for help in setting your policy. There's no doubt, as I said, you are the policy makers, but I think it sets a great example. Flattered and humbled at the same time that you would take advice from the department head. After all, we are the people that you hired. And again, I think that sets a good example for other boards and commissions who are in fact policymakers. But that said, it's very simple. This is a moratorium I'm suggesting to be written into policy. And to give you the Reader's Digest version, if the road's paved, no one can cut into the road for 5 years. Now, if the board were of a different mind, it could stop right there. The first 2 or 3 paragraphs are exactly that. The road's been paved for 5 years. We don't want anybody to cut the road. End of story. But because we're not that kind of town, and because we realize that there are emergencies, and we realize that there are unforeseen infrastructure expansions and improvements, it's actually the balance of the report, or the document, which goes into a pretty good amount of detail as to what should happen if and when either the DPW director, the town manager, or as the road commissioners, the Board of Selectmen allow that to happen. naturally, if there's an emergency, and we've always approached it that way, if somebody's, the road's just been paved and somebody has a heating emergency, they have to get gas out of the street, there's something wrong with the gas line, they have to dig it up, or something wrong with their water line, for public safety, we have to provide them with water. But we don't expect to allow it for convenience. I'm not sure at this point if it's appropriate to go through every detail of how we would expect the road to be repaired. Each cut into the road is different. Could be a little square in the road. We have an approach as to how that would be repaired. It could be trenched to the other side of the road. There's an expanded approach to that. There are longitudinal trenches where, a utility company might want to come right down the road. Now that, we've minimized that because the department goes and reaches out to the National Grid, Unitil, our own water district, way ahead of paving the roads, in order to allow them to do what they have to do before the road is paved. So it isn't likely that would happen. However, I think it's important that we put a policy into place. We look at what is happening and what may happen, and cover every detail that we can. So the longitudinal trenches would be repaired a different way, in that we would go from the beginning of the trench to the end of the trench, and we go curb to curb with the overlay. And the overlay would extend, like, say there's a side road up 50 feet beyond the trench, we would go to that point. If somebody's going to cut their driveway, no, this isn't going to be an issue. We want to maintain the integrity of the pavement for as long as we can. After 5 years, there's language in here that says at the discretion of. I always think that's a good term, because, that puts it at the discretion of the person in charge, which for the time being is me, and the town manager, and ultimately the road commissioners. So there's a chain of command, a level of authority, so that one person isn't making those decisions. The idea isn't to make this difficult for people following this procedure, but the idea is to make it specific and uniform. In other words, what this contractor proposes to do, if he's allowed to do it, he's going to follow this plan. It's going to be the same plan for the contractor over here that grew up in town, and he's going to do it. It's going to be the same plan, a uniformity across the board. We're not only going to discourage cutting into the roads, but if it has to be done, it's going to be done in the similar way, in the same way, for everyone who is allowed to do it. So, questions? Because I know there are some specifics here, and I'll be happy to go through this, but I'm not sure that length of cut and depth of cut and how you replace the subsurface and the infrared patching is very exciting for any of you. Just know that it's in there. Again, I'm open to, of course, you tweaking it, and I am also, again, very pleased that you allow me to put this before you. I think it's long past due for all of us to have this in place.
I've got a couple questions.
Sure.
What happens after 5 years? Are just all bets off? Can they do what they want?
No, it's always going to be at the discretion of the Department of Public Works, town manager. I doubt after 5 years if it will go to the Board of Selectmen. It won't be that critical.
Okay.
As it is now.
So, does this say anything about that? What happens after 5 years?
It doesn't. It states specifically that nothing will happen for 5 years, and if and when something does, how it will be repaired. It might be a good follow-up after that.
Yeah, I was going to say, should we
It's just at the discretion of, but I'll be pleased to add that.
And on that last section, I have some questions. I didn't understand some of the language, and it's probably just me. But in under the process for longitudinal cuts on moratorium streets, the
Yes.
second item, I don't understand, after the about 5-year moratorium, and I don't understand that.
Number 2?
Yeah.
Formal utility notification. That means if there's going to be a utility that's going to cut a trench down for 300 feet, just take it. Well, we're also going to inform maybe the water district, do you want to get into that trench? Do you want to get into the side of that trench? Now?
But when it says including statement about 5-year moratorium and encourages joint trenching opportunity,
Encourages joint trenching opportunity. In other words, if you're the gas company and you want to open up a road for 500 feet, then you're going to be made aware of the 5-year moratorium, number one, if you don't already know it. And we're going to encourage joint trenching opportunity, which is, does somebody else want to get in there? We put a sewer line up Pleasant View. We went to the Leominster Water Department and said, hey, we're going to put the sewer line up there. We understand there's such and such an inch of water main. Here's your opportunity to get into that trench. That's a joint opportunity.
so is that part of the formal utility notification to all parties?
Sure.
Okay, so the formal notification.
So if a utility company comes to me, comes to us, and wants to do something, I'm not going to keep it a secret.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to go to the water district, or to well, we'll know what's going on with the sewer.
So the notification is going to say, okay, you expect them to reach out to,
No, I will reach out.
okay. All right.
Yeah, what he's saying is that while the road is going to be open, he's going to give everybody else who may want to do something to that road while it's open, the opportunity to do it.
Okay. And on number 3, it says staff approves submittal. Who's staff?
Me,
Oh, so so it should be DPW?
DPW staff, yeah.
DPW.
It may not, see, this is a policy I expect you're not going to change every couple of years, so it's built more generically. I could put DPW director, and so forth and so on.
It says DPW every place else, but it just says staff there, so I just didn't understand, that's all. In number 5, there's 2 asterisks.
Yeah, that's the deletion. You'll notice in your revised draft, that's deleted. That's what I spoke of early. Just
So
delete
you're taking
that.
number 5 out?
That would be a deletion, yes.
So then it just goes, so 6 now becomes 5?
Phyllis,
What?
are you concerned about the numbers on the left? Are you concerned about the substance of what's beside?
I'm saying, are you eliminating that item?
I did mention that it was deleted in the current draft, yes.
In the one you handed, it's still there?
Yes.
Okay.
The one you got early on, it's in there.
It's in
The one-
here,
The one you just
both of
handed.
them.
Oh, it's in.
It's still there.
too.
My gracious apologies. It's not supposed to be in there.
So number 5 should
Number
be
5 is
deleted.
deleted with the 2 asterisks.
Okay.
Asterisks.
Okay.
Redundancy of error.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman? I would also want to say that while we recently adopted this in relationship to Leominster Road, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was looking to possibly do a change of a water service, and I was told at that time I was unable to do it because of this policy. So this policy has been around for a long time. That was right after the sewer lines were all done, and it's like, okay, folks, don't do anything. The one thing that I would recommend adding here, it's sort of before the moratorium, is that you have a statement that the DPW will notify property owners prior to the paving of a road that of the requirements of a moratorium, that there be an affirmative duty of the DPW to provide information by mail to the property owners that this moratorium is in place, even if it's on the website and whatever, but when we actually go to do paving, we should let people know 6 months in advance, we're going to be paving, we expect to pave in this area. If you want to do something that's going to upgrade your system, connect to the sewer's going to already be on the side, but anything you need to do, I would like to have that in here it gives more credence to the moratorium saying we've already notified people in advance.
So are you suggesting a letter?
Yeah, some letter with reference to the moratorium, so whatever street, when we just paved Gibson Street, there's no water lines down there or anything else like that, but if somebody wanted to put drainage in, it would be good to say, everybody, we're paving your street, here's a moratorium, you need to know about this.
Okay, just so I want to be clear, as you mentioned, the website and discussions and other things, yes, that's fine, but an actual, a letter to each address, you're saying is more appropriate, or most appropriate?
And it could refer to the website.
Right, okay.
But I think that the fact is, people don't pay attention to what's going on the website until it affects them. And the fact is, somebody may be thinking about doing something and may not think to look about that until they actually go about it. And if they just found out the road was paved, then they're going to miss that opportunity. I think we have to be more proactive 6 months in advance. Or if it's a shorter period of time, I'm open to that too, but we usually know Chase Road is going to be paved at a certain point coming up, so therefore, what do we need to let people know at that point?
Understood.
Mr. Chairman, I agree about the notification. I'm just a little bit concerned about the cost of letters depending on the size of the roadway or the pavement project, as well as the work involved with doing something like that, as far as generating the letters and office staff. So one thought is to not put it a requirement of a letter, but similar to what the utility company does, they leave a placard. So I'm just suggesting that maybe we work out, maybe even a placard that can hang on doorknobs that just outlines the moratorium and can be hand-delivered versus requiring a mailing. Because I know with conservation, they've actually just gotten away from certified mailing because of the cost involved. So I would suggest that we just say that every resident shall be notified in writing and leave it up to the DPW as to how that's done.
And if you pair that with notification to the local newspapers and on our website, then, not an advertisement at the newspaper, but a newspaper article, that type of thing.
Okay.
Between that, I'd be with a placard. The only thing I would say is we need to do a placard on the front or back door, or the door that's normally used. Unitil went around and they put the placard on the front door, and some people don't use their front door, so their trees were cut without being notified.
Used to, when we did about a third as much of the paving, we'd actually go door to door. It's somewhat impractical now, but I can see where if we get more of a head start on it, it'd be a necessary part of the program. So, this is your policy, okay?
I think the point that's being made is that we want people to know before their street gets paved with enough notice that if they had planned to change their service or upgrade something or add drainage, they have an opportunity to hustle up and do that.
And I think 6 months is an appropriate amount of time.
Yeah. And I think it's debatable whether it's a placard or 6 months or 4 months, but I think the board pretty much all agrees that we want to ensure that people have had an opportunity to be notified and don't come in and say, gee, I've been thinking of upgrading, but now you paved my street and I can't do it.
Right.
And an ironic thing is that the Lunenburg Water District is building a new building on Massachusetts Avenue, and I drove by today, and the dig safe notices are on the pavement out front. I'm assuming they're going to connect to the Lunenburg Water District out front. Well, that's appropriate because they're going to be paving Mass Ave, so, the whole concept of trying to get something done ahead of time.
Yeah, that's something I'm not sure that everyone's aware of, since I don't know when you received it, I only received the email last Wednesday, that Route 2A from Shirley to Fitchburg is going to be milled and paved by the state, and all I'm getting from the state, I'm trying to nail them down to a particular time for this reason, not so much for digging into the road, but just as a courtesy to the people that live on the road. And all they're telling me is by the end of June, it'll be finished. That's going to happen fairly soon, 2 to 3 weeks, and end by June. So that's really a windfall for us.
And they have the same moratorium that we're talking about here, correct? The state has a moratorium on pavement cuts after they pave, is that correct?
I'm not exactly sure what the language is
Okay.
on the moratorium.
Okay, well, I would urge anybody that has a project that they want to do in that
Sure.
section of roadway to move ahead with that project quickly.
I'd say it's a little bit late. We have our municipal sewer in that alley, if you will, and I've already spoken to the project manager. I told him that we were contemplating some work on those sewer manholes all along 2A. The good news is that if we buy the manholes, they're actually going to install them for us, which I was quite surprised and pleasantly surprised. So that should take care of as a town, the sewer's responsibility. I think it's a little late for people that might be cutting in.
Just to be 100% clear, though, what we're announcing, and I know we just heard this, is that the state will be paving, a significant paving job on 2A from the Shirley line to the Fitchburg line.
Yes, and we're not sure exactly.
And once they're done, it's probably not going to be allowed to be cut into.
That's correct.
I don't know what they're...
That's correct.
That's not under town control.
No,
anyway.
understood.
Right.
Yep.
And I would hope that, we know of one building, and that's, as Mr. Ebersol said, the Water District building. Hopefully, they're aware of it, and they're okay with, whatever their hookup needs are.
Mr. Chair, first of all, I want to voice my support for definitely notifying people in advance, and the methodology, the method you use, whether it's mail, registered mail, hanging things, you have to be notified, and it's got to be relatively assured that they get it, because otherwise we're going to have another instance like we had on Leominster Road where people didn't know. I have one question. Is this a common moratorium that are in most cities and towns, and is the 5 years kind of standard, or is this just a number that you chose, or is this pretty consistent if you go to other towns?
I'd say it's pretty consistent. I did also find, and it was, limited research to the state in New England, that it was either 3 years or 5 years. For some reason, it wasn't 4, it wasn't 1 or 2, but it was either 3 years or 5 years, and mostly 5 years. Again, that'd be a choice of the board if they...
Mr. Chair, I'm for this with that one addition of notification, otherwise I'm for this policy.
I just have one more point. In the definitions section, it talks to the Public Works Director, may grant exemptions, and I just want to be really clear. Some of them are obvious, provide emergency repairs, et cetera, but, I'm not sure I can understand the nuance between upgrading of underground utility facilities and changing from oil to gas, or whatever the issue was on Leominster. I think we have to be real clear on what, and consistent on what the criteria is for granting exemptions. And I don't know what the right words are, but I think that's one that's worth wordsmithing down to the...
Which one is it specifically, James?
Well, you're talking about the DPW director may grant exemptions to the prohibition.
Third paragraph under definitions that starts with the Public Works Director, on the first page.
On the first page.
You're right, because the Leominster Road thing would have fit into this.
I don't know if it does or it doesn't. My point just is if the director is going to grant exemptions, I think the wording in there has to be real clear about what it would be.
If I may, I think what he's trying to say in that paragraph is, and it's just not worded as clearly, is that all of those have to do with developing adjacent properties. So you can provide underground connections to adjacent properties or allow the upgrading of underground utility facilities. And what I read in there from the construction is that to adjacent properties again. I don't know if that's true. I'll let the DPW director answer that, but that's the way I took it, is that it's not for an individual home. I mean, you want to lock up properties because you can't cut and there's a whole swath of property that you can't do anything to.
I'm fine with that if that's the intent.
I don't know if that's what...
The intent here, if I'm in the correct paragraph, is that conditions are decisions between the grinding, the base and sub-base repairs, or related work.
No, you're...
No, the one above it.
The one above it.
The one that starts with the Public Works Director may grant.
Okay, so it's the second paragraph down there, all right. Okay, then I'd agree with your discussion.
And I just think you need to word that specifically to that.
Okay, again, I'm pleased to do this. Now, perhaps I'll work with the town manager to do this, or perhaps it may be more appropriate for the board to tweak it, whatever your pleasure.
You could just add 2 adjacent properties at the end of that. I would think that would cover it.
And it might not hurt to have town council review this, just because...
Oh, that's a good idea.
We want to be consistent across, I know you're going to try to do it, but we also want to say...
Oh, yeah, I don't
Retire.
disagree. This
What's
is
the policy? That we want to have a
still in
policy
draft form,
clear to everybody.
and I will, Phyllis, make sure that the next draft has that out.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. Do we need to vote on this, or?
Why don't we have town council look at it?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I
fine,
think we
that's
need to
fine.
add the
Yeah,
section
it's
about the
I feel it's
wording for
incomplete.
notifying and, yeah,
Really have the sense of the board, though.
yeah,
Okay,
And add the notification?
right.
Yeah.
okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good step forward.
Okay. Our 7:45 appointment for the entertainment license.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
could, just while the DPW director is here, as one of my updates for the committee reports, I wanted to report on the MPO special meeting last week. 2 projects did come forward. As you recall, there is abundant funding available in all 4 years of the TIP, and we were looking for projects to fill those gaps, and every year is a minimum of $1 million gap. 2 projects did come forward, however, they're not at the point where they are ready, and they can't be incorporated into the TIP. So I just wanted to let you know that although this year is off the table, the 3 following years are very much on the table. So if there are intersections that affect federal aid eligible roads, if one federal aid eligible road is involved, and then a local road is involved, that's eligible for funding. If there are paving projects that we want to consider in the TIP, that, we should submit a PNF for those. And in order to be even included in the appendix, you have to submit a PNF and get a score from Mass DOT. So if we have projects, please, contact Arthur or let me know, and I'll talk to District 3. But there is ample funding available, and although it's off the table for next year, it will be absolutely on the table for the following years, because we will reconsider the TIP next year.
Okay, thank you. That's good news, and it's good news to let people in the audience know. I did get that information from the town manager, and we're starting to look at projects. One thing that I asked her sort of rhetorically is we will have to identify funding for design and engineering.
Just one comment. One of the things that came up, and I don't know if it's because, there is ample funding, but one of the points that was made is there's also for intersection improvements, things like signage or line painting or just minor reconfigurations of intersections don't necessarily have to go through that whole design process. So Brad Harris might be somebody to talk to, because they're looking for ways to utilize that funding.
Yeah, and if you remember, and I'm sure you do, we have that intersection program that was in part, the conceptual design was funded by the capital plan. Mm-hmm. So we do have those on the front burner.
Yep.
So it would be, well, I don't know if I'd say minimal engineering, but we do have a leg up on the engineering.
Right.
So that's sort of in the forefront of our discussion, but it's good to know.
Okay.
That's really unusual.
It's actually, in all the years I've been doing this is the first year, and Brad Harris from Montechusett doesn't remember this ever happening, so.
No, so, yeah, we should jump, again, the upfront money, but, okay,
Right.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your help with
Yep.
that along the way, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're moving to the entertainment license. This is a continuation of our discussion with the Unifier Roots Gathering. Mr. Cohen. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to see everybody. Good evening, Honorable Board. I'm Jason Cohen, and I'm representing the Unifier Roots Gathering that we are proposed to be holding at 300 Holman Street at Darren Massey's property, June 22nd to June 25th. We met with the Board of Health last night, and we feel that it was a good meeting. I believe we got the thumbs up from the Board of Health. We've spoken with the police department, the fire department, conservation, and land use, and we believe we've been given confidence by all of the different groups. involved, and we were wondering if we were here to take questions, really, to see where what we have left that we can share.
Any comments or questions? There's quite a bit of information in our package that came from various sources.
In our packet, is there anything from Public Safety? I saw the Board of Health.
Something from the fire department.
In your right hand.
Is this one?
LFD
Okay,
and LFD.
thank you.
Oh, okay, both of them.
Mr. Chair, I'll say that from the information we've gathered from both emails from residents and other boards, and the determination about the attainment license from our town council, that, and some of the glowing reports that the gentleman in front of us have been given by other events they have posed, I see no issue with following the guidelines that the Lunenburg Fire Department and the Lunenburg Police Department are determining here. If those are followed in the building department, I am in favor of, barring any other information that is not forthcoming so far, I'm in favor of allowing the license, or granting the license.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree, and I would actually make it a motion that we approve the Unifier event at 300 Holman Street with the condition that they meet all of the requirements of all Lunenburg town departments and public safety.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Have a good event.
Okay, thank you so much. Really quickly, I just want to say you have a great town. I do these all the time, and I just love the comment, and congratulations on 12 years. It's an honor to be here, and to be here with your state representatives, and we're going to put on a great event. Please come.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Look forward to it. Okay. First, what?
Just 1 second.
Sure.
Take a comment from Adam.
Sure. Mr. Bernie?
You guys got through that so quick, I didn't get to get up and pitch my one request that the building inspector had made. There is a significant amount of wiring and potentially plumbing that would come along with this event, which is not spoken to in our fee schedule, because who would think we would have an event like this in Lunenburg all the years ago that they adopted the fee schedule? In speaking with the trade inspectors, the building commissioner has proposed that the Board of Selectmen adopt a fee schedule in association with this specific entertainment license to cover the work of the wiring and plumbing inspectors of $150 for wiring and $150 for plumbing, in the necessity that those permits are required. Wiring will clearly be required for the generator, the stage, and all of the other associated electrical facilities. Plumbing is still indeterminate depending on what their final design would be, but the request is made that that fee schedule be adopted in the event that it's required, and that way there's no having to worry about coming back at the last minute to get that adopted. So I put that out to the table to the board and make that request.
So the fee schedule for plumbing and electrical, who adopts that? 'Cause I don't-
You do. You set the fee schedule.
We set the fee schedule.
So, all right.
So, and this would be a one-time amendment to that fee schedule with the understanding that it's applied specifically to this event, based on the discussion the building inspector has had with the event promoter and the breadth of the event and the facilities that they intend to install.
Well, the first question I would have is, as I always have, is two questions. Do we have the authority to do that for an event, number one? And if we pass it after we just granted this license, is it too late to pass that, to have effect?
So I would say, for one thing, we can't act on it tonight because it's not on the agenda.
Correct.
And But I think that any fees, because the motion was stated that it's in compliance with all town departments.
Exactly.
So I think we've got the flexibility to do whatever we need to do.
Because
On its face, I'm certainly for it. It makes sense.
Certainly.
I want them to have the event, but I don't want to lose money with them having an event.
And they are required to have a wiring permit, and if they do put in temporary plumbing facilities, they're going to be required to have a plumbing permit. So it's just a matter of how do we address that, because our wiring permits are generally based on residential redevelopment or fixture counts for plumbing, and that's just it's too specific for an event that's sort of as fluid as what they're proposing.
We need a catch-all minimum
Correct.
permit for any other time.
I was just going to say, I think this is two issues that we're going to need to address, is I think we need to look at the fee schedule and possibly put that for temporary services, the fee shall be determined by the inspector with the approval of the Board of Selectmen. That would solve the problem. And secondly, I think, as Mr. Ebersol stated, because of the way I worded the motion, I certainly think we can put this on our next agenda and set this.
And I think what I'll do is I'll go back and speak with the building commissioner tomorrow. We'll put a proposal together for both of those items, one for the amendment to the fee schedule and one for the specified event.
Great.
And that way you'll have an action item for your next agenda.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Next time, call out.
Don't be so shy.
Don't be shy, right?
Don't be shy. Nobody else is. Our number one, we're going to table until the June 6th meeting. We're not ready for that one. Number two, we have the Hadwin Market Package Store license. You have information in your packet. Is there somebody here to speak to that, or no?
No.
So do we need to take action?
Yes.
We need to transfer the license back to the original owner.
There's a memo from the executive assistant to the town manager that describes the fact that the purchase and sale agreement didn't go through, and we have to, and according to the ABCC, the license needs to be reverted back to.
This may be really, like, something really picky, but I'm looking at, first of all, there's no formalized form. You'd think that the ABCC has everything, every other form in the book. You'd think you'd have a form about this. So I'm looking at one, laser printed copy and one handwritten copy. None of them have any signatures. They just have the name of things. You have them all there?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, so otherwise I have no problem. I just wanted to make sure somebody signed something.
And the fact is that the manager and owner of record and everything else is technically in place until ABCC would have approved it. Since they didn't approve it, that still wasn't in place, so we're effectively reconsidering the action where we approved the transfer, which never took place.
Well, the transfer happened contingent on the sale.
Correct, and
And
the
so now the
sale
sale
never
did
went
not happen,
through.
so we have to rescind that whole act and
So do we have,
never happened. It's a
So
dual.
are they still able to sell liquor?
Yeah.
Right, because the liquor license was never transferred by the ABCC, correct?
right,
Right.
The application was to do it, was to make the transfer.
approved. I believe the transfer was approved, but the sale never went through. So it's been in this limbo mode, and the ABCC is requesting now, since the sale hasn't gone through.
Because they did
That it needs to
approve it.
revert back
Okay.
to the original owner.
Okay.
So,
and the original owner still has, this is not a
Possession of.
liquor establishment, so I was thinking about who's the on-site manager. That's not the case,
Right.
this is sales.
And still meets all of our requirements, and so there's no concerns? Okay.
And probably there would be a fee to reverse the thing, but we probably don't have one, because this is like the temporary
Back to the fee
facility.
schedule.
And Adam went home already.
That's right.
I would make a motion that we vote to return the license of the liquor license of Hadwin Market back to the seller, Ole Ahad.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
So here is your form, Mr. Alonso, coming down. Okay.
that's the
It's all packaged.
Okay, and,
entertainment license.
oh, this is the entertainment license that we just approved. I'm going to just skip down to the interviews, appointments, reappointments section. We're going to put off the assistant town clerk till the next meeting, the 23rd. And there was in terms of closure for the building reuse committee, there's a sample letter that was supposed to be in your packet, so if you want to delay this till next week, if you want to take a look at it. But the recommendation is to have a letter signed by us to the members of the building reuse committee, and that's a sample in front of you at this point.
We should.
Okay, now, my only comment is that the meeting on the 23rd is a workshop meeting that won't be televised, and I'd prefer to hold it then until our next televised meeting so that we can...
To change my name out.
Okay, and so that we can recognize people publicly if that's the wish of the board.
That's fine.
Okay?
Yep.
All right, so now we're back up to minutes. We have minutes for the 18th of April and May 9th. Warrants?
I don't know.
I have an accounts payable warrant in the amount of $223,297.13. A payroll deduction warrant in the amount of $164,257.61. A middle school, high school project warrant in the amount of $140,153.47. And a payroll warrant in the amount of $752,557.36. Are there any action file issues?
I have a couple. There was I mentioned that there was a discussion at the Central Mass Regional Stormwater Steering Committee around the need for each community to have a flood plan survey and flood plan mitigation plan in place, and it needs to be updated every 5 years. I think it would be useful to know where that is.
So we did look into that, and we could not locate a floodplain plan. There's the hazard mitigation plan that has associated flood maps, and we asked the conservation administrator as well, and he wasn't aware of one.
So I can go back to the steering committee and find out, what it is.
Yeah, a little more detail.
Yeah, okay, sure, I'll get some more
If you
detail.
can find a sample plan, too.
Sample plan, yeah. And one more thing, at the Stormwater Task Force meeting, we discussed a goal of trying to get more rain barrels into the community. And since we've established the revolving fund now, where when we sell the rain barrels and compost bins at cost, the money goes back into this revolving fund, and we are able to get like a $5,400 annual grant to help us with that. We were thinking that we would like to offer kind of a combination twofer, and the rain barrel now is $56 and the compost bin is $43, so it's $99. And we were thinking of reducing, if you bought them both, reducing the price to like $80. And we discussed it in the meeting, and Adam said, well, you really should run that by the Board of Selectmen to see if that's okay with them. And the idea is get more people using compost bin, because that reduces trash we have to send out of town, and get more people using rain barrels, because that helps with the stormwater issues. So we thought, if you do a twofer, maybe you would encourage more people.
Is there a cost to the town?
There's no cost to the town because we have the revolving fund, and we get $5,400 annually to buy them, and we sell them at cost. Before, when the money just went back to the town, so I guess you lose that income.
But we're selling them at cost, so by bundling them together, the revolving fund is going to take a loss.
So
Bundle them together, you're not selling them at cost anymore.
Right.
You're selling them below cost.
Right.
So my suggestion is that you give us a proposal and we put it on the agenda, because we actually can't take action on this.
Okay.
Because it's not on the agenda.
Yeah, and I agree with Mr. Ebersol, it should be on the agenda, but I will say that regardless of whether it's a revolving fund or not, I would be concerned about selling something below the town's cost, regardless of whether it's a revolving fund or an enterprise fund.
But the town gets $5,400.
But we spend $5,400, if I understand correctly.
The money is a grant. So you spend the money, that's a grant.
We really should talk about this.
Yeah, we should talk about this on an
We're deliberating.
agenda item. Okay.
All right.
Any other action file issues?
Only because I want to go out with a bang, I'm going to ask about my favorite subject.
Speaking of refuse.
So do we have any on the additional larger pay-as-you-throw bags?
Nothing much substantially different. I did find a memo that Carrie had issued to the board in September regarding the cost for the larger bags. What I would propose is that we do buy a limited amount of bags and sell them at where it'd be at cost, or, cover all the cost of disposal as well. So do kind of
A test run. I'm for that.
For that. So I did.
I thought about that, because if we did go, obviously, no one's going to know about them, so we have to really make note to the public that they're available. I think it'll be a very successful or very popular product, personally.
And we just really have to make sure it says that it 30-pound maximum.
We said that, we talked about printing that on all the bags, just so they're there. It doesn't cost any more to print what we have, and just added, you cannot exceed 30 pounds on any bag.
One other additional action item, could you find out what the status is of the Lake Shirley Dam inspection? It's typically, because it's a high-hazard dam, it's every other year, but could you see where we are in that cycle?
I believe a proposal was provided to the DPW director on that. Did us a spillway inspection, or?
Well, it should be a whole dam inspection, and there is an associated cost with that.
Right,
and there is a
that's-
deadline, so if you could maybe put that on our upcoming agenda.
Okay. Committee reports. Ms. Luck?
The Stormwater Task Force met on May 11th. It voted on the specific task to be incorporated in the Stormwater Community Compact Grant. Adam Burney will work with the town manager to get that submitted. He also offered to research literature aimed at controlling pollution from cars that ends up in stormwater to have available at the cruise night event, which I thought was a great idea. At our next meeting on May 25th, we'll discuss minimum control measures, illicit discharge detection and elimination, or IDDE, and good housekeeping and pollution prevention for permittee-owned operations. We'll then review the entire MS4 permit notice of intent on June 22nd and pass it on to the BOS for their review. The school committee met on May 3rd. They signed the new teacher's contract with the Lunenburg Education Association, which must be ratified by the LEA this week. It is estimated this contract will increase the total school budget, currently just shy of $20 million, so an increase of $1.2 million, by 6% over the life of the contract.
Ms. Bertram?
I just had the MPO update, which I gave already. Planning board, I tuned in late, but the majority of the second half of the meeting talked about the use table and regulations, and I was not able to attend the conservation meeting.
Mr. Alonso?
Cable Advisory could not have a formal meeting last night because we didn't have a quorum, but we did discuss the fact that we just basically chose a date to provide to the selectmen. It is the selectmen's responsibility to call a public hearing, so we do not need a vote of our own. If you guys vote, and I propose through the town manager to be on that determination should be on the agenda next week for June 15th. Finance Committee did not meet, and last week I was away and could not go to the School Building Committee. I will say to this board, I am more than happy to stay on the Cable Advisory Committee to see it to its end. if they so choose. And also, I would say the same about the school building committee, although I don't know that they have many meetings left except the closure, but I offer to stay on them as a point of continuity if you would want that.
Sign them up.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yep. Town manager.
Mr. Evers.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Evers.
No report.
Yeah, and I have no report as well. That's, I read your mind. Town manager report?
Okay, you have my report in your packet. Just a few things to report on tonight. The town hall, the repairs to the building, and to clean up the basement. The DPW director has coordinated the dumpster to be delivered from Casella on May 24th, and we will review all the records that are deemed beyond repair to be put in the dumpster, and they will be sent to an incinerator. The records that will be kept will be placed in a trailer for future mold remediation. And the approximate cost for just the disposal of the records will be approximately $700. We continue to have a problem with insects and rodents in this building that we rely on our facilities department to handle. The TC Passios, the chairman and I met with Dr. Richard Murphy, the executive director of the FLAC program, to discuss their rental space at the TC Passios. They relayed that they're be officially moving out of the building on August 8th. So as we move forward in the next steps of reviewing the future of this building and other municipal buildings, we will be monitoring the cost to operate the TC Passios before and after they move out. An update on the regionalization grant for the animal shelter. In March, we received notification that the grant request submitted by the city of Fitchburg, because they were the lead community that included Lunenburg and Townsend, was awarded in the amount of $42,257 to plan and design a regional animal shelter. Recently, the city of Fitchburg has decided to pursue another avenue for animal shelter services and asked the Commonwealth if this grant could be transferred to the town of Lunenburg, and the Commonwealth agreed to transfer the grant. So we will become the lead community in this grant. It will still be a regional grant because it will include Townsend as well. So as soon as all the contract documents are signed and in place, we can proceed with planning regional animal shelter and move forward with design services, soliciting design proposals. An update on union negotiations. The clerical and firefighters collective bargaining agreements expire on June 30th of this year. And through Labor Council, we've requested to begin negotiations with both unions. We have a scheduled meeting on May 23rd and are awaiting a date for the first meeting with the clerical union.
Okay. Our upcoming schedule, next week, May 23rd, we'll have a workshop meeting. The primary reason for the workshop meeting is to begin or make significant progress on our goals for the upcoming fiscal year and to set the workshop schedule for the rest of the year. It will not be televised. Of course, it is open to the public, but it will not be televised. There's no meeting on May 30th, as that's the last Tuesday of the month. And I just want to remind people that May 29th, the Memorial Day observance is on Memorial Day, May 29th, at Veterans Memorial Park across from the Senior Center at 10 a.m. Our next regular televised meeting will be on June 6th, and I remind everybody that the annual election is this coming Saturday, May 20th. Please get out and vote. Before I entertain a motion to enter executive session.
The quarterly financial report.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I missed the quarterly financial report.
It's old news anyway now, so.
We're in the next quarter.
This is just going to be a summary of the March 31st, 2017 revenues and expenditures. I can tell you that everything is on target. Revenues were actually at 77.06% of the FY17 estimates. A few things I'd like to mention about the revenues is that through March 31st, we had collected 85.43% of the FY17 local receipt estimate. And to highlight a few of the local receipts that are above, we had departmental revenue for the schools at 102.98% of estimates, licenses and permits at 94.22% of estimates, motor vehicle excise at 89.96% of the estimate, special assessments at 84.22% of the estimate, and miscellaneous non-recurring revenue at 85.72% of the estimate. We did have a few categories that were running slightly under, one being fines and forfeits, which was at 48.93%, and the other local option meals tax, which was at 63.61%. As far as taxes go, we had collected 75.93% of the levy through March 31st of 2017, and state aid, based upon what we just heard from our legislatures, we have collected what we anticipated at 74%. On the expenditure side, we had expended and/or encumbered 68.4% of what was budgeted. Most of the issues that we had, we've already taken care of through the votes at at the annual town meeting for the FY17 budget. Some of the budgets that were adjusted at the special town meeting were the reserve fund, which we reduced by $98,000. The town manager's salary line, which we reduced by $7,000. The annual audit, which had a small surplus of $1,750 that we reappropriated. The Council on Aging, we actually increased their budget by $3,100 because of the changes in the MART reimbursement due to the changes in the contract. The Animal Control Officer, we increased her budget $10,600, and that was for the care of the pit bulls that she had taken into custody that were being abused. Monty Tech Assessment, there is going to be a surplus in that line of $9,209 at the close of the year due to changes in the assessment. Snow removal, we did do a supplemental appropriation of $166,000 at the town meeting. There is still a small deficit that we need to cover, but we should be able to do that internally within the DPW's existing appropriations. Veterans benefits, we actually reduced by $45,000 at the annual town meeting. Health insurance, we reduced by $31,100 at the town meeting, and unemployment on the town side, we reduced by $8,000. And the majority of all of the reductions were used to offset our snow removal deficit. So everything's looking good. And I actually looked at the revenues for the end of April, and through the end of April, we have collected our motor vehicle estimate for 2017. So everything that we collect going forward from May 1st through June 30th should flow right to free cash. So that's good news. And on the expenditure side, I think we'll be able to cover everything within existing appropriations. We don't know of any departments that won't be able to cover any of their shortfalls. So we should have another good year.
Awesome.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Karen. Okay. So as I was saying, before I entertain a motion to enter executive session, is there any public comment from the public? Is there any public comment from the board?
Just want to say that probably the next time I'll be here on Tuesday night, I'll be at a different microphone.
And you'll be welcome. I'd like to entertain a motion to enter executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct a collective bargaining session or contract negotiation with non-union personnel, in this case, the finance director contract. not to return to public session.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, Mrs. Luck?
Aye.
Ms. Bertram?
Aye.
Mr. Alonso?
Aye.
Mr. Ebersol?
Aye.
And I for myself.